Hey y'all, Scott here. I got nothing. And when I'm completely bone dry when it comes to ideas, that's when we bust out the idea wheel. Let's see what we have to talk about today. Ah, son of a bitch. Okay, well, I guess I'm talking about the L button today. Holy I have no idea how I got 23 minutes out of that topic. Oh, Jesus Christ. Ha, the physical video game. Look at all this plastic, it's great, right? The box has always been something I've considered one of the simple joys in gaming. Something that doesn't matter in the slightest when it comes to legitimately enjoying a video game, but is something that just sticks with you. I always love just looking at the box, reading the back, seeing all the art. Physical video games are just something that I've always appreciated, and back in the day, that was partially due to the inclusion of this smattering of paper. The video game manual is something I think we only really started talking about until it started to go away. In this digital-heavy age, it's easy to look back at all the little things with games we always took for granted, but really miss now that they're basically gone. Stuff like gaming magazines, demo discs, cheat codes. These aren't dead, but they're dead. Tons of my favorite video game related things have been replaced by much more resourceful and easier solutions, all thanks to this home wrecker. It's the internet, home to such things as... Now, is the internet truly a stupid looking garbage man for killing what once were these little joys of video games? I mean, no, are you kidding me? They got chat roulette on this thing. Yeah, magazines were great, but I can get all this info immediately online. Don't lie, as much as you say, man, I miss magazines. If you had the choice between only getting gaming news immediately through the internet or once a month via a magazine. I don't even have to finish that sentence, you already know what you're gonna pick. But I get it, it's the whole joy of having a physical, tangible thing to flip through, to read all this information, see pictures and advertisements for other games. You only get this thing once a month, you better savor it. With the internet literally giving you everything you could possibly want at whim, it's harder to appreciate the smaller things, like some cool formatting on a page in Nintendo Power, or finally finding out that human beings bought Faceball 2000. Damn it, Scott, you may be saying, I thought you were gonna talk about paper, not paper. We got a little off track here, but the point I'm trying to make is, things are way easier now with a lot of physical things moving to digital. Technology has advanced so much that a lot of the physical things we got back in the day are no longer necessary. But it's a bit harder to appreciate them in this form. Gaming magazines are fundamentally dead, but the content they offered isn't. This kind of stuff can all be found online, and it's way more convenient. However, I still miss the feeling of magazines. They just felt so much more special. This sentiment rings true with so many other elements of gaming, with video game manuals being the most obvious one. Buying a new video game was always an exhilarating experience pre-2011, and a lot of that was because all of this was only half the story. With most games, you would always get instruction manuals, with reading them being my favorite method of realizing I'm a moron. The instruction manual was a necessity back in the early days of gaming, giving you details on the controls, the story, the characters, basically everything you needed to know to get started. In-game tutorials were a rarity. Most NES games you just pop in and immediately start playing. Instruction manuals picked up the slack when it came to teaching you how to play the game or telling the story. This is definitely why so many NES games don't really tell you what to do or how to play because you were expected to read the manual. And oh boy, were these things made for reading. Plus, they all had a notes and memos section in the back where you could jot down little reminders. I don't think anybody actually did this, so I'll start the trend. Gotta use these more often. Look at the Legend of Zelda's manual. This is the culmination of everything that made these things so fun to flip through. All this colorful art, tips and tricks, story details, the enemies' names, even a map. This is the titan of the retro video game manual. It's great when they came in full color and almost acted like mini strategy guides. When you truly love a game, you kinda wanna dive deeper and get a better look at the characters and story, and great manuals like this one let you do that at no extra cost. NES RPG and adventure games got the best booklets. Star Tropics, Final Fantasy, Zelda 2, Dragon Warrior, all of these things got full color platters of information with extra art drawn just for it, apps, the works. It's great to see exclusive artwork in these things. Bubble Bobble had its story explained through a comic, and Mario 3's is just so much fun to look through. But not all manuals were created equally. Keep in mind, this was the era of English, mistranslations, made-up plots, spelling errors, or just completely wrong statements, all par for the course when it came to NES manuals. Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, congratulations! You now own the authentic Konami home version of Simon's Quest, one of Konami's many original arcade hits. Konami lied to me? I love the game screenshots. Sometimes they literally just slammed a Kodak in front of the screen to take a picture. Other times, I guess they did the same, but added a negative effect to everything to make it easier to see in black and white? Manuals would continue to get better and better over time, even when they became more and more unnecessary. Around the SNES and Genesis era, games started to become more conscious, offered tutorials, became less cryptic, but that didn't stop manuals from really hitting it out of the park. The best ones felt like an extension of the game's world. Like, oh man, it feels like I'm with Marcus Phoenix right now, where did all this blood come from? Or just when the manual retains the style of the game, like with Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar knows how to manual. You know with them you're getting a nice thick booklet and a huge map or a poster, it's great. Even in the golden age of manuals, not everything was amazing though. You knew a game was probably not a top priority to a publisher when the manual was in black and white. It was almost a warning sign that the game you bought was stupid garbage. Not always the case, but you knew a publisher really cared when they gave you full-blown color, multiple languages, like wow. They care. Nintendo, you old dogs. Almost every Nintendo first-party release since the SNES gave us these manuals you need spark notes for. Full color, and with the Wii, multiple languages, plus these fun little flyers giving you Donkey Kong upskirts and some new game suggestions. Hey Skyward Sword fans, you'll love Wii Play Motion. Hey look, I'm in Wii Play Motion. Things were going pretty alright in the world of folded pieces of paper with staples through it until the latter half of the Xbox 360 PlayStation 3 era, when manuals became more of a dying art form. Less and less time went into them. More often than not, you'd see black and white, and they consistently got thinner and thinner. Sometimes they just gave a small control layout on a single folded piece of paper. These could be charming. Nintendo did a lot of this with the 3DS, and this worked fairly well. I'm cool with this, although I'd prefer more detail. But hey, it could be worse. It could be a complete waste of my eye resources, because there were some games that didn't even want to do the bare minimum. I mean, at this point, you might as well just give up. If you're gonna include an instruction manual, include an instruction manual, even if it's just a control layout. At least some people will get use out of that. It can be a legitimately helpful little booklet, even if it's all in black and white and just a folded piece of paper. When you just barf some terms and conditions garbage out here, you're effectively really wasting paper. Sure, a real manual uses more paper and more ink, but some people will actually get use out of it. If you're gonna use paper, actually use paper for something useful. Go and pop the terms and conditions on the inside of the artwork or on the back of the box art. Now, this whole death of the manual thing going on could easily be associated with recent years in gaming. But let it be known that Home Improvement on the SNES was one of the most influential games of all time since it kickstarted the revolution of not including manuals. Real men don't need instructions. The manual writer really stuck it to us there. The death truly set in for me with the release of Smash Bros. Ultimate. Here's a series that always prides itself in including manuals of the thick honkin' variety. Man, when you're holding a copy of Smash Bros. Brawl, you know it. Look at all this. Even Smash Bros. For 3DS and Wii U. These were released when manuals were this. They showed you all the characters and their moves. This wasn't as in-depth as previous manuals, but still solid. But when we open up Smash Bros. Ultimate, nothing. And now instruction manuals are more so reserved as a premium bonus in special releases and not much more. Now, the space generally reserved for manuals are used for DLC codes, terms and conditions, or advertisements. Can't wait to pop open Sonic Mania Plus. I mean, let's be honest, when they were actively being produced for every game, it was pretty rare you'd actually crack out a manual. It was kind of something to flip through right after you bought the game in the passenger seat on the road home. Now, why do I say this? Well, take a look at the electronic manual. Who the hell uses this thing? I'm sure most people didn't even know loads of games have electronic manuals, but they're here. The thing is, barely anybody, even people who know the e-manual exists, have ever said, I don't know what to do, to the electronic manual. Most of the time, people just look up questions they have online. I mean, it's probably quicker to do that than hit the home button on the Wii U, click the electronic manual, and wait for it to load. It is kind of sad to me that the electronic manual got overlooked because some of them are really fun and have a lot of love shoved into them. These legitimately feel like the old manuals, but now in a form that allows for cool things like animation. And now some games have manuals basically built into them. The only example I can think of off the top of my head is Mario Odyssey, and I mean, it's something that people really didn't use. So I think that shows that tutorials and in-game storytelling have replaced the instruction booklet, and the only reason we liked them was because they were tangible items. You turn a manual into a PDF, almost everybody kind of loses interest. But still, now that they're gone, every time I open up a new game, it's just disappointing. It feels like something should be here and it almost never is. Now, one great new trend with a lot of physical games is art on the inner sleeve. Since most game cases are transparent, some companies have been printing art on the inside, which is always a treat to see. It's kind of a nice way to bring a little bit of the instruction manual back without wasting paper. Sure, I'd rather get a nice thick paper booklet and see the earth get polluted the up, but I'll gladly take this. It gives you something to gawk at when you open a case up, and it's way better than Terms and Conditions McGee over there. You can find manuals and stuff like special releases of indie titles, but that's about it. Red Dead 2 came with a map, but no booklet, and Nintendo basically dropped paper inserts entirely with Switch games. Things aren't looking too good for these guys, and it's pretty crazy they're being treated as premium bonuses nowadays. I loved flipping through manuals to games I loved. I actually remember bringing a few manuals to daycare to flip through. But like with magazines and demo discs, they're obsolete, and if you bring them back, it's cool, but not a lot of people are actually going to use them. Even though they're all but gone and they weren't used that much to begin with, they'll always have a place in my and countless others' hearts. Well, as a tribute to the instruction manual, I will fully commit to one and carry out whatever it tells me to do. Oh, okay.
What's the recipe for surprising the kids, treating yourself, and ditching dish duty? You're looking at it. Order your Pizza Hut faves like original pan, original stuffed crust, and more at pizzahut.com. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Pizza Hut stuffed crust is the crust that made crust good. Topped and stuffed with over a half-pound of cheese. What are you so afraid of? Loving it? Original stuffed crust, just $12.99. Only from Pizza Hut. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Hey y'all, Scott here. I like candles. Sue me. I should stop ending sentences with that. But I like them, they're fun, and I just bought all these from the store on clearance. They must be clearing the shelves for even more candles. And I'm sure somebody new will make them. What the hell is this? Nothing beats a homegrown video game. The game made by the developers who crafted the series in the first place. Who better to make Eco than Eco? Hey, they made the worlds, they made the characters, they should know exactly what to do. Until they don't want to anymore. Things change, mom and dad don't give a anymore. You don't know why, it just happens, and when my parents give up on me, 343 Industries takes custody. Many game franchises have to go through a messy divorce at one point or another, and when there's nobody to take care of them anymore, surely somebody has an open weekend. More series than you may think go through this, especially long-standing ones. A shift in developers. Whether it's a one-time thing or it's permanent, tons of beloved franchises get new developers all the time. Sometimes it's for the best, sometimes it's for the worst, and many times it's for the eh. The shift can be blatantly obvious, with the tone or feel changing drastically. Do you really think the Pac-Man World 2 developers would make Pac-Man talk? This is Blitz games all over it. But sometimes, new developers replicate the original style so well that it's nearly indistinguishable from previous entries. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was the third entry in the Tomb Raider reboot series, primarily developed by Crystal Dynamics, and while they did help with this game, it was mainly done by Eidos Montreal, and I cannot tell any differences. It looks and plays exactly how you'd expect it to, and I feel like the lesser review scores were mostly because it was the third game in the series and not much has changed. People are getting a healthy dose of I'm sick of Tomb Raider-itis. But let's hear it for Eidos Montreal, the babysitters of the Tomb Raider franchise. Montreal is the one-stop shop for sequels to games not made by the same developers. You want a new Batman Arkham game not made by the people who made the Batman Arkham games? Do I have a city for you? Warner Brothers Montreal created Batman Arkham Origins, which was made when they were trying to pump the these games out every 2 years. The original developer Rocksteady was busy making Arkham Knight for next-generation consoles, so throw it to the B team. If any Canadian territory could do it, I guess this one. But yeah, you can kind of tell this wasn't done by the same people as the others. It's not bad, but the quality definitely isn't as high as the Rocksteady titles. It definitely feels like more filler than a true new Arkham game. They don't even include this one in recent collections to the Wii U. But what if the new developers do a better job than the original ones? What if they best them in nearly every way? That's rich. Oh, it can happen, no doubt, but most of the time when a new developer takes over, it's not really because they show more promise than the original devs. It's not because they have better ideas or are more capable of developing the franchises. More often than not, it's because the corporation that owns the series wants it to continue with more games, but the original team wants absolutely nothing to do with it anymore, so you know what that means. I've always wanted to go to Montreal. I usually don't think about it that much. When I hear a new team is taking over development of a series, I don't immediately jump to that being a bad sign or anything. But yeah, looking back at a lot of these, the last thing I would want is my child being raised by Capcom Vancouver. Hi, Scott Wozniak, Smear Campaign enthusiast. I love dragging developers through the mud. In fact, I hate developers, each and every one of them, especially if they try to make a Sly Cooper game. That's why I need to weed out which ones are bad and which ones are really bad. We're gonna be taking a look at a few game franchises that switched developers at one point or another and see what changed in the transition and if adoption is really the best solution to all problems. First up, let's discuss Microsoft is one of the shining examples of changing developers of their IPs, mainly because the original teams kept leaving. Bungie created the Halo series. Halo is literally the Xbox game, and because of that, when Halo 3 was positioned as the finale with the tagline "Finish the Fight," Microsoft promptly pissed themselves for 5 years straight. Bungie developed a few prequels after 3, but when Halo Reach released, they were donezo. Microsoft then decided to form a studio that's primary purpose was to just continue the Halo series, and they just couldn't stop finishing the fight. 343 Industries isn't a bad studio, far from it. I mean, Halo 4 and 5 look spectacular, but fans just don't feel like this is Halo anymore. 343 isn't a studio making these games because they want to continue the series, they're doing it because Microsoft is telling them to. It's a similar situation with Gears of War. With the original developer Epic Games moving on, Microsoft decided to structure a studio that was hell-bent on continuing the Gears of War franchise. And while Gears of War 4 and Gears 5, that's the full name, good use of words, are solid titles, they just feel unnecessary. It doesn't help that a lot of people blew their Gears of War load on the 360 with 4 games. They kind of got sick of it. And similarly to Halo, the franchise's name just doesn't hold the same value anymore. Halo and Gears of War are kind of continuing for the sake of continuing. The original developers were done with them long ago, and Microsoft keeps them afloat because you can't have an Xbox without... And then Crackdown changed developers every time. This is a great sign. Real-Time Worlds to Ruffian Games to Sumo Digital. Now, some team members transitioned over from developer to developer, but let's be honest, the Crackdown series just got worse with every game. Sumo Digital's a pretty good studio, but they're kind of the babysitter of the series developers don't want to make anymore. They worked on Little Big Planet 3, while the original team at Media Molecule was hard at work on Dreams. It took 7 years to come out, so I think that was a fair decision to have another studio work on Little Big Planet. And in my opinion, Sumo did a pretty decent job with 3. It felt like Little Big Planet, bad platforming and all. But what killed the game was the technical problems. So many bugs and glitches and long loading times. It pretty much killed this game right out the gate. And while this is a competent experience, it was bogged down by a lack of testing. I'm sure if Sumo Digital had more time with the game, they would have been able to prove themselves worthy of the franchise. But I think the launch tainted their image. Many fans consider this to be the death of the series. But see, Little Big Planet 3 was a game I knew people weren't too hot on. On the contrary, do you ever just assume some games are enjoyed by a fan base and then use this? Oh my god. We got the Sly Cooper trilogy on PlayStation 2, a beloved set of stealth platformers developed by Sucker Punch. Now, I have no nostalgia for these titles as I was too invested in at the time, but I have dabbled in them since, and these are wonderful games full of style and life. It's a shame they fell victim to the great PlayStation curse. You make around 3 entries, get out. Most of the time, this is due to the original developers themselves wanting to move on, and in this instance, Sucker Punch began working on the Infamous series. However, hints of a new Sly Cooper game consistently appeared, even in Infamous itself. That was because somebody was willing to work on Sly 4 instead. That's right, the mystery case files of the Malgrave Incident guys, Sanzaru Games. They're perfect! They pitched a Sly Cooper 4 to Sony back in 2008. Sony then tested the waters by letting them remaster the originals for PS3, and soon they handed over the keys to the franchise franchise for 2013's Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, it was okay. As somebody who's not a mega fan of Sly Cooper, it's difficult for me to truly go, oh yeah, this is way better than this. Like, I've seen a fair amount of people who weren't diehard fans of Mario Party say Super Mario Party was the best game in the series. The did they just say? It can be difficult to judge the quality of a recent entry in a series if you weren't too exposed to the previous ones, and I feel that a bit with Thieves in Time. But from what I've gathered researching fans' opinions on this entry, the characters and style were tweaked a bit too much for many's liking. The story continued on from 3 with them going, oh, Sly retired from thievery, that was a joke. But overall, it didn't necessarily feel like they were pushing the series forward, rather they just kind of took what Sucker Punch did and tried to do it again. And even though Sanzaru has made some quality titles, they aren't nearly as talented as Sucker Punch, I think that's very fair to say. From what I've played, this is totally fine, but the general consensus is the originals on PS2 are obviously superior, with Thieves in Time being a decent, albeit unnecessary return to form. We got another series that disappeared for a while just to end up anti-disappearing with a new father in tow, Luigi's Mansion, one of the better compliments you could give somebody. A launch title for the GameCube, its primary function was to show off just how graphically impressive a Luigi's Mansion could be. So much dust and lighting effects, it was a very short game and the gameplay wasn't anything crazy, but it was a fun little romp regardless. However, this game has a huge fan base, people who love everything about it to death. This little game had so much character, whether we're talking Luigi, Professor Egad, the ghost, or the mansion itself, it was an incredibly charming and memorable experience. But it also had this light sense of uneasiness. It was still a family-friendly game in the Mario universe, but it was just eerie enough to have that perfect amount of spookiness to it all. It was developed internally at Nintendo, the EAD division, most known for developing the Nintendo games you actually care about. But when a sequel released 12 years later for the Nintendo 3DS, Next Level Games were in charge this time around, and results were somewhat different. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon featured a new art style for the environments and original characters, which was much more angular and exaggerated, which I think is fine. It gives it a 1950s retro haunted house feel, but it's not nearly as atmospheric, and it always felt odd to me that they didn't tweak the designs of Luigi or Egad to fit more with the rest of the art style. The ghosts in the original look like dead Mario characters. They look like they were designed by the same people who designed Luigi, but here in Dark Moon, they don't even look like they belong alongside the Boos in the game, the main ghosts we see in the Mario series. And with the game being on a handheld, they felt the need to alter how the game was set up. Now, there are multiple mansions and you have missions to complete, which makes the game more suitable to just pick up and play. Now, I don't really blame Next Level for this decision, but it's not the most ideal setup for Luigi's Mansion. However, they came back with Luigi's Mansion 3, and this is an improvement. Sure, the art style is still a bit mismatched with the regular Mario designs, but 3 makes up for it with absolutely gorgeous lighting and animations, phenomenal puzzles, and a setup closer to the original, albeit not the same, but that's totally fine. It's a sequel, it's supposed to be a bit different. I feel like the gameplay is far more engaging and well thought out than the original, but that one had far better atmosphere and is overall a more memorable and replayable experience. But hey, with 3, I do think Next Level Games has proven themselves worthy of the franchise. I think both 1 and 3 stand on their own as equally good titles. 1 does some things better than 3, and vice versa. Dark Moon wasn't as good. A game not being on par with the original? That reminds me, Dead Rising!
I'm winning. If you really want to win this, we should do the Freeze Drive Ritual!
Silence! TBH, the elixir!
Elixir? I brought Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper is the elixir.
Something going on around here.
My people are coming to kill everyone.
You have to do something about this. You're an alien. Phone home.
This
is why they don't let pseudo-Europeans who lived in China who come from Portland try.
Our story began in Waterdeep, the city of splendors, with a group of scoundrels.
You'll be completely safe with me.
I really do love you, but that was absolutely disgusting.
A spider the size of a horse.
I shouldn't have picked these bowls.
In battle with a black dragon wormling.
You guys are happy.
Dead Rising was all about surviving a zombie-infested mall for 72 hours, helping civilians and mauling psychopaths, and at your disposal is all of the above. The game's primary claim to fame was the idea that if you can pick it up, you can use it as a weapon. Couple that with how cheesy the dialogue and characters were while the story took itself as seriously as possible, we have ourselves a winner. The first title was developed internally at Capcom, and it didn't take long for them to give up. Dead Rising 2 was developed by Blue Castle Studios, and Capcom dug their work so much they bought them, and with that, Capcom Vancouver was born just to die. Dead Rising 3 was an Xbox One launch title, and finally we had Dead Rising 4 before death. Well, I've only played Dead Rising 1 and 4, and my opinion is, oh god, 1 is better. 4 is obviously technically superior, it looks really nice, controls fine, there's so much on screen at once, it's pretty impressive. But it doesn't feel like we have as many options in terms of weapons like in the first game. It felt like literally everything could be used. Here it just feels like any average game. I can't pick up any of this, just whatever the game decides is convenient for me to pick up at that given moment. Also, the big thing 4 advertised was the return of Frank West, the protagonist from the first game. Except this character isn't Frank West. He has the same name, he kinda looks like him, but the writing here is so much more self-aware and makes him out to be a wisecracking ass. The original Frank West was pretty serious, which made it more funny when the player decided, oh, let me be stupid. The serious story perfectly contrasted with the ridiculous weapons and cheesy dialogue, and they make things way too jokey in 4, and it just feels forced. But Dead Rising 4 is a decent enough game, I just think it isn't a great Dead Rising game. I don't really think the developers understood what people liked about it. It just kind of felt like they heard that people liked Frank West, but didn't know why people liked him. However, it's a fine overall game. But it doesn't compare to, oh Jesus God no. Mario Party's like people with skin. It's everywhere. The original party game. Get your friends together, traverse a giant board, and play a minigame at the end of each turn. Collect coins to purchase stars, and whoever has the most stars at the end wins. It was a simple concept, but it made for a phenomenal multiplayer experience. So much bullshit happens, it's magical. However, that bullshit is balanced out with pure strategy, deciding the right time to spend your coins or which direction to move on the board, trying to win the most minigames. It all evens out to an experience that does require some strategy, but is luck-oriented enough to be interesting and hilarious. Hudson Soft was the developer, and they kept at it for 8 whole games on home consoles alongside 2 on handhelds. And they released a new one nearly every year from 1998 to 2007, and then nothing. After 3 Nintendo 64, 4 GameCube, and 1 Wii game, the series stopped, which really puzzled me. Mario Party 8 sold insanely well, and for them to only make 1 entry on the console was absurd. The Wii was practically made for Mario Party, and they only made 1? Well, the hiatus ended up being due to Hudson Soft going through some changes. Konami ended up turning them into a subsidiary before just dissolving the company entirely. They're just Konami now, and because of that, Mario Party's future was uncertain for a while. Really, Hudson was the only one to develop the games. Sure, Indie Zero developed the card game Mario Party E, and Capcom did some arcade games, but the B did the heavy lifting. But then, Nintendo had a great idea. Let's up. This'll be great. Let's have the company who developed Wii Party do Mario Party from now on. From great, I mean putrid. Mario Party returned with Mario Party 9 on the Wii in 2012, developed by ND Cube, and it just wasn't Mario Party. Everybody was in a car now. That tears it! Whatever you rolled would move the car for everybody. You were collecting mini-stars. Minigames just happened randomly when you'd land on a certain space. It felt like they were listening to reviews that were just really tired of Mario Party by then. I mean, I would be too if I had to review these games every single year. Most of them read like, 8 Mario Parties. This is getting stale and repetitive. ND Cube went, alright, let's do something different and worse. This style tried to simplify Mario Party, but ended up unnecessarily complicating it all. I think the original setup was far more immediately understandable. It's a board game, you all roll and move individually. Here, what the hell kind of board game do you all move together in a car? Because everybody moves together, you can't really strategize where you want to go because where you end up is dependent on what the last person rolled. And the boards themselves had a definitive beginning and end. They were completely linear, and all you wanted to do was roll enough spaces to get to the finish line, which just isn't that fun. I liked exploring the boards in the original games, making it to an item shop before friends did, strategically waiting around a certain area. This just feels like the goal is to get the game over with. At least the minigames were fine. That's the saving grace of every Mario Party. I don't think a single one has nothing but garbage minigames. They're all fairly alright. Thankfully, with their next entry, Mario Party Island Tour on the 3DS, they went back to everybody moving separately, but the game boards were still start to finish linear experiences. Definitely better than 9 style, but god, this isn't great. Everything's just overly simple and bland. But at least with Mario Party 10, they had a chance to redeem themselves. It's the car again! They brought back the car from 9, and it really has not been improved at all. 10 is just another 9, which just makes it worse in my opinion. They could have improved things, but no, it's the same! There's a special mode called Bowser Party, which allows one player to be Bowser on the Wii U gamepad, where they're actively trying to hunt down the others and beat them. But this mode only has like 10 minigames to play, which gets old quick. Mario Party Star Rush on the 3DS was next. What the hell is this? Alright, so Star Rush is very different. You all roll simultaneously, which saves just so much time. That's the big selling point of the game. It's the Mario Party for the working man. Don't have any free time? Here's Star Rush. It's definitely the most unique one of the bunch, but really doesn't feel like Mario Party to me. So the next year, they made another 3DS game, this one being the Top 100, a collection of the best 100 minigames from the series past. This was a phenomenal idea. Why did they put this on 3DS? This game celebrates the home console history of the series. They have pretty much no representation of the handheld entries. I'd rather play Mario Party on a home console. I don't want to round up 3DS owners to play this. On top of that, this is literally just the minigames. The way NDCube wanted you to play this is to just pick a minigame, play it, and move on with your day. Nobody wants to play just minigames. You need boards to hold that experience all together, and this game has one board. And it just reuses assets from Star Rush. Thankfully, Super Mario Party came out for the Nintendo Switch, and is a step in the right direction. It goes back to the standard formula of the original games, but there's only 4 boards, and they all stink! They're all really tiny and are based on a grid, which makes them super bland. I mean, they're doing better than they have before, but I never trust a man who prefers Super to 6. The thing is, though, most of these were negative changes, developers that didn't really know how to recapture the magic of the original games. But just take a look at these. Sonic Mania, fans from 3 different studios coming together to make a 2D Sonic game even better than the originals. And Metroid Prime, Retro Studios bringing the series into 3D in one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, and bringing Donkey Kong Country back. The original 3 were great, but the 2 Retro made are some of the greatest platformers of all time. Yoshi's Woolly World, I'd say, is on par with Yoshi's Island. And then they follow that up with this. But the point is, even then, sometimes new people can bring new ideas. They can be more knowledgeable about where a series should go, more so than the people who actually created it. But damn it, that isn't the case with Candles. Hey y'all, Scott here. You know, so many people ask me, where do you get all those games? Yeah, that'll do. This is a used video game. Could you tell? Video game users are disgusting. We have sticky chairs and eat without socks on. So why are video games one of the most prevalent mediums where used products get swapped around? Everybody buys used products from time to time. There's no reason not to. I mean, the guy may have licked it beforehand, but the bread's still good. But for as many used DVDs and books and CDs and clothes and razors you can find on eBay, Amazon, and thrift stores, why are used video games so much more immediately accepted? Yeah, we all buy used versions of these, but I hear so many people say, I bought used clothes, I didn't know that was possible. But video games have always been associated with secondhand buying. Of course you have some secondhand movie and music shops, but you kind of have to specifically look for them. Almost every place that sells video games sells used video games as well. I don't even remember ever getting a used movie or album as a kid, but video games? Hell yeah, this one had gum in it. Why are used games so prevalent and why won't this come off? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how expensive video games have always been. Why buy a brand new video game for $60 when you could buy it used for $55? I can think of a few reasons. But see, you spend 20 hours with a game, and when you're done with it, you're generally done with it. Why not sell it and use that money to buy another game? See, most people, when they've had an experience, they're okay with letting it go to have more experiences. This isn't normal. But when a game changes hands a few times, it's bound to show some wear after a while, and because of that, there are loads of different species of used games. Firstly, we've got the lookalikes, used games that look nearly indistinguishable from new games. The game case is spotless, everything's included, absolutely no problem whatsoever. You could eat off of these things. Then we've got the sloppy seconds, games that are generally all together, they look fine enough, but have some slight imperfections. The game case is starting to get chapped, look at this, it looks dehydrated. There might be some crinkles here and there, and some light stuff missing like the manual or any extra inserts. It looks like the last owner used it as a napkin, but it's inoffensive to own. You may get less job offers, but with games like these, who needs them? But looking at the small little imperfections in the game cases, that just makes you ask, how did it get this way? Especially with games that recently came out. You ever see a used copy of a game that released a month ago and it's already on its deathbed? Games just get these random hickeys sometimes. Like, this is my copy of Super Mario 3D World. I've owned it since launch, taking good care of it. It has this for some reason now. My copy of Call of Duty Black Ops on Wii? Not my copy of Call of Duty Black Ops on Wii! One day in 2011, I found it on the floor with this gash in the middle. I did patch it up with tape, and thankfully it was in a spot I could cover up with black Sharpie, but these two moments made me realize games are far more fragile than you may expect. Which is odd. Game companies know their products are handled by young children. You'd think they'd use bulletproof paper or something. Because this is just the beginning of the end. Thirdly, there's the frauds. You see them at the store and think, oh, that's looking pretty good, pull it off the shelf and weep. There's something wrong with my WarioWare. If the seller didn't have the original artwork for the game case, they may just print off their own. At least they're making an effort. Sometimes the print quality is actually pretty good and can be misleading. Sometimes I'll pick up a used game and it'll take a while for me to realize this is a lie. And then other times I ask, okay, so you made an effort, but you didn't? Some people use the lowest quality box art scans they can to print off their copy. Sometimes it's not even the official box art, they'll just use whatever pops up on Google first. You can make the argument, oh, they were in a rush, they didn't have time to find the highest quality box art. Then why print box art in the first place? I have a love-hate relationship with these. On one hand, it's good to see people care enough to print off high-quality box art, but I don't want printed off box art, I want the real deal. I have a man to be, and I won't be that with fake Luigi's Mansion. At least with the box art printouts, I mean, it's beyond obvious it's fake, so there's no fooling here, but like, who thought this looked okay? It's more fun to see the box art that's drawn on with Sharpie. It really puts you in the shoes of the last person who owned the game. Like, how did you lose the box art? You kept the case, you kept the disc, the manual? How do you lose the artwork? That almost seems like it's the hardest thing to lose. If the whole case was missing, I'd understand, but the artwork? You'd have to make a conscious decision to get rid of that. And then the stickers, oh God, the stickers!
Pizza Hut stuffed crust is the crust that made crust good. Topped and stuffed with over a half-pound of cheese. What are you so afraid of? Loving it? Original stuffed crust, just $12.99. Only from Pizza Hut. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Freeze drive ritual!
Wednesdays on E!
Today, breeding season.
I will not be doing that. 8 celebrity kids.
My dad is Shaquille O'Neal.
Your dad is worldwide. 0 life skills.
Oh my God, what are you doing?
Relatively famous ranch rules. Wednesdays at 9, only on E!
What's the recipe for surprising the kids, treating yourself, and ditching dish duty? You're looking at it. Order your Pizza Hut faves like original pan, original stuffed crust, and more at pizzahut.com. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Our story began in Waterdeep, the city of splendors, with a group of scoundrels.
You'll be completely safe with me.
I really do love you, but that was absolutely disgusting.
A spider the size of a horse.
I shouldn't have picked these bowls.
In battle with a black dragon wormlet.
You guys are happy.
Dr. Vanderspiegel. Glad to have you back in patients. Speech!
Get out of my house. My people are coming to kill everyone.
You have to do something about this. You're an alien. Phone home.
You have no idea who you are dealing with.
I think we might have gotten off on the wrong foot.
See, now this shit's getting weird.
Every used game needs some kind of indication what its price is. It just so happens the only way to do that is to staple it on. Why are stickers on video game boxes the most powerful stickers of all time? Sure, you get the easy peel-off ones, but those are few and far between. Most of the time, these things have melted to the plastic. They're impossible to tear off in one go. And even if you do tear it all off, sometimes the sticker juice is left on. It makes the game case stick to all other game cases around it, and then it attracts the world's hair population. You have yourself a sticky case with just a great personality. Even the tiny garage sale stickers can be a pain. They're so small and rip in half so easily when peeling them off. And who the hell ever thought it was a good idea to put stickers right on any paper included on the product? The box art, labels, this cartridge has so much plastic space, but you just had to smack the sticker right here. Why go out of your way to put stickers on the artwork itself instead of just the plastic case? I guess it's to prevent you from swapping price stickers on cases to get a better deal. But who does that? I got the cashier to think they were ringing up apples when they were really ringing up bananas. I just learned an easy way to get stuff on the cheap. Steal it. While peeling stickers off can be therapeutic, I have had one a day. I've very rarely seen any used game sellers get stickers right. That's how we get these old cartridge games with torn labels. I assume this is from stickers because if it wasn't, how the hell did it get this way? Listen, I understand some people just don't care about treating dumb plastic bullshit with respect. I get it. It's just in a condition like this, I wonder how could it have possibly accidentally gotten like this? And I remember watching somebody open a game for a birthday present. They open it up and go, nice! They start peeling off the shrink wrap and they didn't realize they were also peeling off the game case itself. Happy birthday. That's like, how does this happen? How does this happen? What about this? What, did you like spill water on your game and you tried to dry it off with a saw? Each used game with a purple heart has a story to tell that I'll never know, but sometimes you can make assumptions. Sometimes you get notes left in from the original owner, and back in the day, places like Hollywood Video would brand their games like cattle. This is etched in there. There's no way getting around this. But hey, I now know this happened to be a rental video game. See, this is annoying, but also a part of history. I can at least look at this and go, cool. But this is never gonna be fixed. With stickers, yeah, this is stupid, but that's where a funny neighbor who smells really bad comes to help. Goo gone, you just squirt that all over. The next person that owns this is gonna have the exact same questions I do. What the happened here? This usually helps get rid of that sticker residue. Now, don't get me wrong, I like this, but I would never drink it. It just smells too bad, I couldn't. But some stickers are just a bit too tough. Much like the Hollywood Video branding, there are some stickers that are basically permanently bonded to the plastic. This Microsoft Company Store Purchase sticker falls under the category of neat but go away. Now, this was purchased within Microsoft by a Microsoft employee who really wanted to play Whacked. That's really cool. Now, why do they need an ass-large sticker that's impossible to peel off? I'm trying everything I can here. To be fair, if it's just the case that's the issue, you can almost always swap it out with a better one. The problem is trying to find another one. The first thought is, oh, I'll get an old sports game. Those are in the dollar bin, nobody's buying them. I can harvest that thing for its shell. But they have their own impossible sticker to remove. Most EA Sports titles have this shiny branding that you can peel off, but it's gonna leave a lot of residue. I mean, there are other games to put out of their misery to simply use their cases, but some games, they're too far gone. Thanks, Caden. A lot of people like to label their property. Oh, some games even encourage that. Pokemon Stadium on N64 had this spot to put your name. Weirdly enough, my copy of Pokemon Stadium is clean, but Kirsten just had to write on Pokemon Snap. Now for these, there are a few ways to clean them up. I like using magic erasers. Dab it in a bit of water and scrub a bit if it's on plastic. Many times marker comes right off. Now when it's on paper, welcome to Corp Central. This is all fairly common for used games though. Weirdly enough, a lot of secondhand game stores don't really care about cleaning their games before reselling them. Sometimes they plaster stickers all over the place, sometimes in places that could do a lot of damage, and other times they just don't even use new cases if theirs is all cracked and sad. The thing is, these stores make most of their money off of used games. New games they don't make much of a profit off of. Most of the money made from those go straight back to the publisher. Used games, they just bought from some sap in the store. They can charge whatever they want for them. They can make as much of a profit off of those as they so please. So why do they do this? Yeah, no problem. That gets cleaned, it voids your warranty. Used games are disgusting half of the time in these stores. But even the most disgusting used game of all time doesn't even begin to compare to the worst offender of me seeing something of all time. Out. So sometimes when people sell their used games, all they have is the disc. At least it makes more sense than not having the artwork but having the case. Like, oh man, I need more space. There, some people just prefer having the disc on a spindle. I can never look them in the eye, but hey, that at least makes sense. That saves an unbelievable amount of space. But of course, people who only have loose discs don't take the greatest care of them. Hey, here's that game you wanted back. I lost the case. I left the manual in Reno. I wanted to give you that back. I wanted to give you back what's rightfully yours. So when am I looking after your daughter? But for some reason, GameStop and various other stores accepted loose games like this. And where did they go? In the GameStop generic cases. They just have the game console's logo, a really off-center age rating. Oh look, it's rated E10+, and a very sloppily typed on title. Who the hell buys these? Who? And then for the funkier cases, stuff like the PS4, which those games don't have DVD-sized cases, they mold their own, and they're the cheapest things imaginable. Why have that attention to detail? Why put PS4 games in these types of cases? Are the kind of people who buy games in the GameStop generic cases really the type of people who would say, this isn't the size of a normal PS4 game? I thought this was a GameStop, not a witch. Why go that extra mile if you're gonna put this in a GameStop case? I might as well just use a regular DVD one. Need for Speed Hot Pursuit on 360. This is a Wii case with a baseball sticker. Okay, you have the GameStop generic case, but you have the original artwork. How did that happen? How do you lose the case but not the artwork? What about the old GameStop cases? Those were better and worse. Yeah, just some cartoon characters throwing gang signs. The GameCube one has a mom buying a sack for a kid, and this same guy, but backwards. Let's see how many problems we can find with this. Okay, so somebody put a sticker on the spine of the artwork, tried ripping it off. This is a GameCube game in a PlayStation 2 case. They still have literally every piece of paper that was included originally for some reason, and worst of all, it's Geist. Eventually, the only way you can buy certain games is used. There's no beating around that. Sometimes prices can be dirt cheap. Sometimes they can skyrocket above what they originally went for brand new, and if it's a brand new used game, you save $5. And just buy it new at that point. You know, the profits you can make off of used games must be incredible. I mean, look at all these wholesale lots online you can buy. F it, I don't need a house payment. I decided to buy a bunch of mystery used game lots. I have no clue what games are included. This is gonna be fun. One of my lots came with an empty jar of minced garlic. Yeah, I guess to package these games tightly in a container, the seller included minced garlic for padding. Well, let's see what we got here. Bull. Yeah, lots like these are basically trying to get rid of used games that have been rotting on game store shelves that would never sell on their own, so they sell them as a part of a 50 NES game lot, and they're nothing more than boo. Oh my god, this lot came with a sealed GameCube game. That looks like ass! This is my first used brand new video game. There were some good gets in here, but most of the time you're playing with fire with these lots. Basically, I now own all the games nobody wanted to own. Now, game companies don't really like used games. They'd vastly prefer if you bought them new. That way, they make money. See, they ain't making anything off of a used game sale. That's all the game store's profit. And we've seen time and time again companies trying to incentivize people to buy their games brand new. In the latter half of the 360 and PS3's life, there were online passes where if you wanted to play online multiplayer, you had to input a code you got with new copies of the game. If you bought the game used, it's likely the online pass was already redeemed, so to play online multiplayer, you'd have to pay $10. Now I see a lot of launch editions where you get bonuses for buying the game around its launch window or pre-ordering it. However, with digital games, you can't possibly trade those in. Nintendo gets all the money from you buying their games digitally. Sony doesn't have to give a cut to a retailer. Microsoft doesn't have to worry about people buying those digital games used. The war against used games will forever permeate through gaming history. And at least with digital, the companies make more money off of their products, which means they can fund even more great projects in the future. Or they can give their CEOs $4 more. Digital is the way of the future. That's just where gaming's heading. And while I don't think physical games will ever leave for good, digital is definitely what most of these companies want. So while used games can be disgusting, they're a part of gaming culture. And I would love to see a digital game do this. I found Dig Dug.
See you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, everybody watching at home from around the world.
Yes, I'm here in Cologne for the finals of Intel Extreme.
Hello and welcome to another episode of GeForce Crash Course.
He's the first cleanly has. Nexus is next. G2, they can't let it slip. Oh no, they're letting it slip. Okay, Hunter and Nico will collect.
E is the only place Hollywood icons would send their kids to work.
Dude, are you kidding me?
Wednesdays on E.
Today, breeding season.
Nope, I will not be doing that. 8 celebrity kids.
These are the shoes I was telling you about. The Prada ones? They're perfect for the ranch, right?
Famous parents.
My dad is Shaquille O'Neal.
Your dad is like worldwide.
0 life skills.
I don't touch sheep. I don't ride horses. Oh my God, what are you doing?
Giddy up for relatively famous ranch rules. Wednesdays at 9, only on E.
I didn't realize there would be actual applause.
Yes!
Life-changing.
That's all you do in this game. Graphics and what have you. Marvel Spider-Man by Insomniac Games gets a 5 out of 5.
So I have a question. Am I considered a classic?
Zelda! Oh.
Hey y'all, Scott here, and it's amazing to think that a company established all the way back in 1889 made this. Whoops. Being one of the 3 major video game companies, it's a bit odd that Nintendo is the only one of them that is strictly a video game company. They don't make computers, televisions, phones, none of that. Just video games. The thing is, it wasn't always like that. Nintendo was originally established on September 23rd, 1889, over 125 years ago, which implies they haven't always made, video games. The easiest way to describe Nintendo before video games would be a toy company. Yikes! I've never covered the toy industry before, so to get a good idea of what we're dealing with here, I'm gonna go to Five Below and grab a toy for reference. In terms of toys, it's an inflatable gator kind of day. Cashier said it was the first inflatable gator sale of the day strictly for reference material. Originally named Nintendo Koppai, the company originated out of Kyoto and was founded by Fusahiro Yamauchi. The company's original objective? To produce and sell handcrafted Hanafuda cards. These are Hanafuda cards made by Nintendo. This deck specifically is called the Daitorio cards and features Napoleon on the case here. Daitorio translates to president, and Napoleon was an emperor, something just refuses to add up here. This is just one of the few decks Nintendo still produces, and yeah, Nintendo still puts out Hanafuda cards, some even featuring Mario characters on them. These new decks can be scooped up for around 20 bones or so, but if you want some original vintage Nintendo Hanafuda cards, well, be prepared to spend. The packaging here is incredibly nice. A hard plastic case holds the cards, and opening this, we have a silver package containing the deck. Opening that up, let's take a look at the cards themselves, and my god, these are a thing of beauty. Hanafuda cards translates to flower cards, which is fitting. These cards are very much focused on looks. Each one has wonderful art displayed here, specifically nature-oriented. They're all incredibly tiny and are made out of hard plastic. No numbers on them like standard playing cards. The use of numbers in playing card games are replaced with art in Hanafuda-based games. This was due to gambling being banned in Japan, as it was a major problem associated with playing cards. Since Hanafuda focused on art instead of numbers, gambling wasn't as easily associated with it, although there were workarounds like assigning numbers to specific cards. Hanafuda can be used for all different kinds of card games, none of which I have the slightest clue on how to play. Nintendo Koppai was basically the cream of the crop when it came to Hanafuda cards for years, and was basically all the company did for the first few decades of its existence. In 1933, Fusahiro stepped down and his adopted son-in-law Sekiro Yamauchi took over as president, renaming the company after an unlimited partnership, Yamauchi Nintendo & Company. 1947 rolls around and Sekiro creates a distribution company, Marufuku Company Limited, to help distribute the cards. After suffering a stroke, Sekiro's heir was to be his adopted son-in-law, Shikanoho Yamauchi, but since he abandoned his family, bring in Hiroshi Yamauchi, Shikanoho's son and the longest-standing Nintendo president, holding office from 1949 to 2002. So Nintendo was a family business, but not blood family at all. Since the first two presidents did not have sons, they had to settle for their son-in-laws, and in the second president's case, his grandson-in-law. Hiroshi Yamauchi was the first president of Nintendo to really start taking risks and do new things, like renaming the company to the Nintendo Playing Card Company. Hiroshi started to see that playing cards could only get the company so far, especially considering that they were primarily associated with gambling, meaning the market for them was a bit limited, they didn't have wide appeal. That was until 1959 when the Nintendo Playing Card Company and Disney partnered up to pop Disney characters on Nintendo-made cards. This was a turning point for Nintendo. This venture helped broaden their playing cards appeal and bring in families and children. This was not only a huge success, but the first instance in which Nintendo garnered an audience of families and children, a market Nintendo would cater to basically for the rest of its existence. Hiroshi changed the company's name one last time from Nintendo Playing Card Company to simply Nintendo, as he was ready to experiment in other industries with the copious amounts of cash they got from the Disney card success. Like I said, Hiroshi Yamauchi, who I'll just refer to as Yamauchi from now on, wanted to expand beyond cards, and these expansions included taxis, food, a vacuum cleaner, and love hotels. Hotels specifically for quick, sexy in-and-outs. Nintendo ran sex hotels. The mere fact would make any smug uncle say, "Well, there goes the neighborhood." All of these products and services failed. Hard. With the card industry at a low and their other business ventures flopping, Nintendo was in bad shape in the early 60s, borderline bankrupt. It's not like nowadays when Nintendo reports a loss in a quarter, like they have billions just sitting there, they're fine. No, this was 1960s Nintendo. Definitely not a company that could afford a loss. But their experience with playing cards and the Disney venture gave them experience in the games and children's entertainment industry. So they gave toys a spin. They dabbled in the market with things like board games and whatnot, some featuring licenses from Disney, Popeye, and Ultraman. But it truly starts when one of the most integral employees that ever worked at Nintendo came into the picture. Gunpei Yokoi. Everybody talks about Shigeru Miyamoto, Eiji Aonuma, Koji Kondo, Satoru Iwata, and justifiably so, but the late Gunpei Yokoi basically crafted the Nintendo everybody fell in love with. A Nintendo that was full of creativity and fun. It wouldn't be this way without Yokoi. He was originally just a lower level maintenance employee at Nintendo helping manufacture cards. Yokoi invented a grabber device and was fiddling around with it at work one day. Yamauchi noticed and was impressed. The item was mass-produced for the Christmas season in 1966 under the name Ultra Hand. You could extend the arm and grab items like the balls with stands that it came with. The product was a huge hit and thus officially catapulted Nintendo into the toy industry. And from here on out, the vast majority of this info was gathered from BeforeMario.com, a crazy cool website dedicated to this era of Nintendo, the toy era. Incredibly high quality pictures and descriptions of the toys they released. Check it out if you're into that sort of thing. Nintendo as a toy company was the first instance of that classic Nintendo creativity shining through. Looking at a lot of these products, they're insanely cool for the late 60s, early 70s. I think if released nowadays, they'd still be really cool. They generally take a very simple concept and turn it into an incredibly fun little toy. Take, for example, the Ultra Machine. Didn't think I'd have an actual vintage Nintendo toy, did ya? Please, never doubt me. Please. Yeah, I only recently got this, and it's already one of my favorite Nintendo-related things I own. It's a pitching machine, comes with a hearty supply of balls and a plastic bat with a classy Nintendo logo on it. It's really cool, and it works far better than I think anybody would ever expect it to. This toy also marked the first time a logo similar to the iconic one we see today was used. There were a few other variants on the Ultra Machine, but I believe this was the first edition from 1967. The sheer variety of toys released during this period is staggering, everything from a love tester to an early version of Duck Hunt. Yeah, Duck Hunt. It would project ducks onto a wall and you'd shoot them with a light gun. That's insane. There's the Punch Boy, mixing exercise and fun into one toy. A Magic Set, a tabletop game called Wild Gunman, which would later be turned into an NES game, where you and an opponent just start slinging bullets at each other. Mach Rider, which again was turned into an NES game where you can shoot out a car from a launch pad. The Space Ball, which flung these top things wherever you pleased. The Power Lift, a remote-controlled forklift. Time Shock, which is like the game Perfection, where you have to put all these pieces into the right spaces before time runs out. They also made toy guns, which sounds fun, holy I don't know about you guys, but I can definitely see Nintendo in a lot of these toys. Not all of them are home runs by any means, but a lot of them you can see that Nintendo charm within them. Yokoi didn't work on all toys, but was a key factor in a good chunk of them, but wanted to try his hand at video games and came out with the Game & Watch. Nintendo as a whole started to work on video games with the release of the Color TV game series of Pong consoles in the mid to late 70s. And thus, with the venture into arcades and their own home video game console, the toy era of Nintendo ended, and from there on out, they have primarily been a video game company. However, they still do throw in a fair amount of winks and nods to their past. Super Mario Maker features this bird design on their Hanafuda cards. Pikmin 3's main character's planet is named Kopai, which hails from the company's first name, Nintendo Kopai. Ultra Hand got a downloadable game on the Wii entitled Grill Off with Ultra Hand, and the portrait of Napoleon from the Dictatorial Hanafuda card set can be found in Nintendo Labo's House game. I love seeing them reference this kind of stuff, and I love looking back at this era of Nintendo. It's crazy to think the same company that gave us Animal Crossing gave us a chance to score some quick Nintendo's reign as a card, toy, and sex factory was fun while it lasted, but it's pretty nice with them as a video game company at the moment. It also seems that they never had any desire to get into the inflatable gator business, so if you excuse me, I'm going to part with this humanely. Neighborhood's going to